The fluorescent lights of the Hart Medical Group boardroom cast sharp shadows across Vanessa Hart's face as she stood at the head of the polished mahogany table. Her white Armani suit, tailored to perfection, not a thread out of place, spoke of control, authority, the kind of power that came from years of clawing her way to the top of a regional hospital empire. 8 facilities across Michigan, 42,000 employees, a quarterly revenue stream that made shareholders smile and competitors nervous. But today, the 14 board members staring back at her wore expressions that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. Richard Brennan sat 3 seats to her left, his silver hair gleaming under the overhead lights, fingers drumming a slow rhythm against the polished wood. The CFO's smile didn't reach his eyes. It never did, especially not since 18 months ago, when Vanessa had discovered the phantom vendor contracts, the redirected payments, the $890,000 that had somehow found its way into accounts Richard thought she'd never trace. She'd given him a choice then: quiet repayment and a blocked promotion, or federal prosecution and public disgrace. He'd chosen survival. But survival, Vanessa had learned, didn't mean gratitude. It meant patience, planning, waiting for the moment when the hunter became the hunted. Richard leaned forward, his voice carrying the practiced tone of a man who'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. The board has lost confidence, Vanessa. Your personal scandal has become a liability we can no longer ignore. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She'd known this was coming. The leaked photos, the tabloid story, the whispered conversations in hospital corridors about the CEO who'd abandoned her biracial son and was now using company resources to buy back a redemption she didn't deserve. A board member, Gerald Thompson, 63, old money from Grosse Pointe, the kind of man who'd never worked construction or worried about overdue rent, cleared his throat. His words came out measured, clinical, stripped of anything resembling compassion. Your alleged son, the one you walked away from 2 years ago. This is more than bad optics, Vanessa. It's a pattern of instability. The air in the room thickened. Vanessa felt her pulse hammering in her throat, the same sensation she'd felt 2 years ago when she'd walked out of Marcus Thompson's apartment at dawn, leaving behind a 6-month-old baby who'd cried through the night while she sat on the bathroom floor, too broken to pick him up, too terrified to stay. Postpartum depression, the doctors had called it, a chemical imbalance, treatable, temporary. But Eleanor Hart, Vanessa's mother, the woman who'd built this empire from a single clinic in Detroit's East Side, had called it weakness, a liability, a threat to everything the Hart name represented. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'm not resigning. My son needs me. Richard's smile widened. He'd been waiting for this. Your son, the one you haven't seen in 2 years. The construction worker's kid who conveniently showed up right when we're negotiating the biggest deal in company history. Tell me, Vanessa, how does that look to our investors? The words hit like a slap. Vanessa's jaw tightened, her gaze locking onto Richard's with a kind of intensity that had once made him flinch. But today, he held steady. He had the board. He had the leverage. And he had nothing left to lose. She opened her mouth to respond, but the image flashed unbidden. Liam's face pressed against the glass of the hospital conference room 2 months ago, his small hand pointing, his voice bright with recognition, despite the fever that painted his cheeks scarlet. That's Mommy. That's my mommy. The screen in front of her went dark. Somewhere in the building a phone rang. The sound faded. The image froze. Vanessa's expression caught between defiance and something deeper, something that looked like the first crack in a dam that had held back 2 years of guilt, shame, and the kind of love that didn't fade just because you'd failed to be worthy of it. 2 months earlier. Marcus Thompson woke to the sound of shallow breathing and the mechanical hum of the air purifier running at full speed in the corner of his one-bedroom apartment. Detroit's early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting strips of gold across the worn hardwood floor. The bills on the kitchen table were exactly where he'd left them the night before. $920 for rent, 12 days overdue. $340 for hospital copays that kept stacking up faster than his paychecks could cover. $78 for utilities that the landlord kept threatening to shut off if he didn't pay by Friday. His paycheck stub sat beside them. 52 hours at $18.50 an hour. Overtime that barely covered groceries, and the 7 prescription medications Liam needed just to make it through the week without his immune system collapsing entirely. Marcus pushed himself upright, every muscle protesting. 3.5 years of 12-hour shifts on construction sites had carved permanent aches into his shoulders, his lower back, the joints in his hands that stiffened in the cold. But the aches didn't matter, not when Liam's soft voice drifted from the twin bed across the room. "Papa?" Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides. Liam lay curled beneath the dinosaur print comforter Marcus had found at a thrift store on 8 Mile, his small body dwarfed by the pillows Marcus had arranged to keep him propped upright. Severe Combined Immunodeficiency, SCID. The doctors had used the term like it explained everything, like it justified the 7 pills Liam had to take every morning, the sterile masks Marcus wiped down with disinfectant before every outing, the isolation that kept a 3.5-year-old boy from daycare, playgrounds, birthday parties, all the things normal kids got to experience without thinking twice. Marcus knelt beside the bed, his calloused hand brushing Liam's forehead. The fever was back. Not dangerous yet, 99.2, low enough to manage at home, but high enough to remind Marcus that every day was borrowed time. Liam's dark eyes blinked open, bright despite the illness that lived in his blood. "How much do you love me, Papa?" The question was ritual now. 4 words Liam asked every morning, every night. Sometimes in the middle of the afternoon when Marcus came home from work smelling like concrete dust and rebar. Marcus's answer never changed. "More than all the stars in the sky, little man." Liam's smile broke through the fatigue. He reached up, his small fingers wrapping around Marcus's thumb. "That's a lot of stars." "More than you can count." Marcus helped Liam sit up, then moved to the kitchen counter where the pill organizer waited. 7 medications, color-coded by time of day. Blue for morning, immunosuppressants to keep Liam's body from attacking itself. White for noon, antibiotics to fight off infections his immune system couldn't handle. Red for evening, antivirals, just in case. Each pill cost money Marcus didn't have. Each refill meant another call to the insurance company, another argument with a customer service rep who'd never met Liam and didn't care that skipping doses meant risking his life. The photo on the shelf caught Marcus's eye as he measured out the pills. Sarah Thompson, her smile frozen in time, her hand resting on the swell of her belly 6 months before Liam was born. She died when Liam was 6 months old. Breast cancer, stage 4, the kind that moved too fast for treatment to matter. Marcus had been alone ever since. Just him and Liam. No family nearby, no support network. Just a construction job that paid barely enough to cover rent and medical bills that never stopped coming. Marcus handed Liam the pills one by one, watching as the boy swallowed each with practiced efficiency. 3.5 years old, and Liam already understood that survival meant discipline. It was a lesson Marcus had learned the hard way, the kind of lesson that carved lines into a man's face and turned 36 into something that looked closer to 45. By 7:30, Marcus had Liam dressed and fed. Oatmeal with a spoonful of honey, the cheap kind from the dollar store that didn't taste like much but filled the gap. Liam ate slowly, his appetite dulled by the medications, his energy already flagging even though the day had barely started. Marcus checked the thermometer again. 100.1. Higher than an hour ago. Not critical, but trending the wrong direction. He made the call. The clinic receptionist answered on the third ring, her voice flat with the kind of boredom that came from answering the same questions 100 times a day. Marcus explained the fever, the lethargy, the way Liam's breathing had gone shallow overnight. She put him on hold. 3 minutes. 5. When she came back, her tone hadn't changed. Bring him in. We'll fit him in between appointments. St. Catherine's Medical Center rose from Detroit's northwest side like a monument to institutional efficiency. 7 stories of steel and glass, parking lots that stretched for blocks, a main entrance flanked by manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than Marcus made in 6 months. He'd been here a dozen times in the past year, emergency visits when Liam's fever spiked too high, follow-ups with specialists who talked in terms Marcus had learned to translate through sheer repetition, immunologists, hematologists, geneticists who studied Liam's blood like it held secrets worth unlocking, even if unlocking them cost more than Marcus would earn in a lifetime. He carried Liam through the automatic doors, the boy's weight almost nothing in his arms. Liam wore his dinosaur pajamas, blue cotton with a T-Rex on the chest, the fabric worn thin from too many washes, and a Superman cape Marcus had sewn from an old bedsheet. The cape dragged on the polished tile floor as Marcus crossed the lobby. A few people glanced their way. Most didn't. In a place like this, sick kids were background noise. The pediatric wing sprawled across the second floor. Marcus knew the route by heart now. Left past the gift shop, right at the elevator bank, down the hallway where motivational posters lined the walls, bright colors and empty slogans about hope and healing that felt like lies when you were the one carrying a child who might not live to see kindergarten. Liam stirred in Marcus's arms, his head lifting slightly. Papa, where are we? Hospital, little man. They're going to check you out, make sure everything's okay. Am I getting better? The question landed like a fist to Marcus's chest. He forced his voice steady, the same calm he'd learned to project even when panic clawed at the edges. You're strong. Strongest kid I know. Liam's head settled back against Marcus's shoulder. The fever had climbed. Marcus could feel it through the thin fabric of the pajamas, heat radiating from Liam's small frame in waves that spoke of danger, urgency, the kind of crisis that insurance companies called pre-existing conditions and hospital billing departments translated into numbers Marcus couldn't afford. They passed the administrative wing, glass walls on both sides, offices visible through the transparency, conference rooms, executive suites, a world Marcus had never belonged to and never would. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the pediatric reception desk 20 yards ahead. But Liam's voice pulled his attention sideways. Papa! Papa, look! Marcus stopped. Liam was pointing through the glass wall of a large conference room. Inside, a woman stood at the head of a table, her posture commanding, her blonde hair pulled back in a style that probably had a French name Marcus didn't know. She wore white, not hospital white, something tailored, expensive, the kind of suit that announced status before a single word was spoken. A presentation screen glowed behind her, charts and graphs Marcus couldn't read from this distance. Around the table, a dozen men and women in business attire watched her with expressions that ranged from attentive to skeptical. Liam's small hand gripped Marcus's shirt, his voice rising with an excitement that cut through the fever haze. That's Mommy! That's my Mommy! Time fractured. The corridor noise, the beeping monitors, the overhead announcements, the shuffle of feet on tile, all of it compressed into silence. Marcus stared through the glass. The woman turned slightly, her profile sharp against the backlit screen. Recognition hit like electricity through water. Vanessa. 2 years, 730 days since she'd walked out of his apartment at dawn, leaving behind a 6-month-old baby and a note scrawled on the back of a grocery receipt. I can't do this. I'm sorry. No explanation, no forwarding address, no calls, no texts, no trace. Just absence where a mother should have been. Marcus's grip on Liam tightened reflexively. His son, their son, was reaching toward the glass now, both hands extended, his voice bright despite the fever that made his words slur slightly. "Mommy! I knew it was you!" Through the glass, Vanessa's head turned. Her gaze swept the hallway. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met Marcus's. The professional mask cracked. Color drained from her face. She rose from her chair so fast it scraped against the floor. Every person in the conference room turned to follow her movement. Marcus stood frozen, Liam clutching his shirt, the weight of 2 years pressing down like concrete. He wanted to move, wanted to turn away, to carry Liam to the pediatric desk and pretend he'd never seen her, never confirmed what some part of him had suspected the moment Liam pointed, that Vanessa hadn't just left them. She'd built a new life. A life with corner offices and tailored suits and the kind of power that came from forgetting the people you'd abandoned. But Liam was reaching, calling out, and Vanessa was already moving toward the door. The conference room door swung open. Vanessa stepped into the hallway, her heels clicking against the tile with sharp, deliberate strikes. Behind her, the board members leaned forward in their seats, whispers starting to circulate. A man with silver hair, Marcus caught the nameplate on the table, Richard Brennan, CFO, pulled out his phone, angling it toward the hallway. Vanessa's voice came out strangled, barely audible over the ambient noise. "Marcus?" He said nothing. The word felt lodged somewhere between his chest and his throat, tangled with rage and grief, and the memory of holding Liam through fever-soaked nights while Vanessa was, what? Building a career? Climbing corporate ladders? Forgetting them? She took 3 steps closer, her eyes locked onto Liam, and something in her expression shattered. The professional veneer, the CEO composure, it crumbled in real time. Her hand rose to her mouth. Tears welled, spilling over before she could stop them. "Liam." His name on her lips sounded like a prayer and a wound at the same time. She dropped to her knees, eye level with the boy, her white suit pooling on the hospital floor. "My baby. Oh God, my baby." Liam stretched his arms toward her, his small fingers grasping at air. "Mommy, I missed you so much." Marcus's jaw tightened. Every muscle in his body screamed to pull Liam back, to shield him from the woman who'd proven she couldn't be trusted. But Liam was already leaning forward, straining against Marcus's hold, his voice breaking with a need Marcus couldn't fill, no matter how many nights he stayed awake, how many bills he paid, how much love he poured into the cracks Vanessa had left behind. Marcus's voice came out flat, stripped of emotion, because emotion would crack him open. "Liam, that's not..." But the words died, because Liam's face was bright with recognition, with hope, with the kind of certainty that came from somewhere deeper than memory. And Vanessa was crying openly now, her hands reaching but not quite touching, as if she understood she'd lost the right to hold him without permission. The hallway felt like it was closing in. Marcus became aware of the stairs, nurses pausing mid-step, visitors slowing as they passed, the quiet hum of judgment that followed moments like this. A black man holding a sick child, a white woman in a designer suit on her knees. The tableau wrote its own story, and Marcus knew exactly how people would read it. Security appeared at the edge of his vision. 2 guards in navy uniforms, their posture alert but not aggressive. One of them spoke, his tone professional but firm. "Sir, you need to move along." Marcus's grip on Liam didn't loosen. "My son needs a doctor," Now. The guard's eyes flicked to Vanessa, then back to Marcus. The hesitation was brief, but unmistakable. Marcus had seen it 1,000 times. The pause, the calculation, the split-second assessment of who mattered more in spaces like this. Vanessa stood, her movement fluid despite the tears still streaking her face. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'll handle this. Get Dr. Okafor to pediatric ER immediately." The guard stepped back. Marcus's chest tightened with a humiliation so familiar it barely registered as pain anymore. This was the world he lived in, a world where his word meant nothing until a white woman in power validated it. He met Vanessa's gaze, his voice low and edged with steel. "I don't need your help." Liam's small hand patted Marcus's cheek, pulling his attention down. The boy's eyes were wide, confused, caught between the joy of seeing his mother and the tension radiating from his father like heat off asphalt. "Papa, why can't Mommy help?" The question gutted him. Marcus closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, searching for words that wouldn't break his son's heart or betray his own. When he opened them, Vanessa was still standing there, her expression raw with something that looked like regret, but could just as easily be guilt or shame or some cocktail of emotions Marcus didn't have the energy to decode. "Please," Vanessa's voice cracked on the word. "Let me help. He's burning up." Marcus felt Liam's forehead against his neck. The fever had climbed. 103, maybe higher. The kind of spike that meant emergency intervention. IV fluids, medications, Marcus's insurance would fight to cover while Liam's condition spiraled. He didn't have a choice. Not really. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford when his son's life hung in the balance. "Fine." The word tasted like ash. "But this doesn't change anything between us." Vanessa nodded, her throat working as she swallowed. She turned toward the pediatric wing, already pulling out her phone, already moving with the kind of efficiency that came from power and resources Marcus would never possess. He followed, Liam's weight shifting in his arms as the boy's energy flagged. Behind them, through the glass wall of the conference room, Richard Brennan lowered his phone. The screen showed a photo. Vanessa on her knees, Marcus standing over her, a sick child between them. The image was cropped just right, ambiguous, scandalous. Exactly the kind of ammunition a man with a grudge and nothing to lose could use to destroy everything Vanessa had built. But Marcus didn't see it. He was already moving down the hallway, following the woman who'd walked out of his life 2 years ago, and was now walking back in, trailing power and promises he had every reason not to believe. The private consultation room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Marcus sat in a plastic chair that was too small for his frame, Liam curled in his lap, the boy's breathing shallow and labored. Across from him, Dr. Kenneth Okafor, 45, Nigerian-American, the kind of cardiologist who'd probably never worried about hospital bills in his life, reviewed Liam's chart with an expression that made Marcus's stomach drop. Vanessa stood by the window, her arms crossed, her professional mask back in place, but fragile around the edges. She'd made the calls, pulled strings Marcus didn't know existed. Within 20 minutes of their confrontation in the hallway, Liam had been fast-tracked through triage, examined by specialists who normally required weeks of advance booking, and installed in a private observation room that probably cost more per night than Marcus's monthly rent. Dr. Okafor set down the chart. His voice carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering bad news to people who couldn't afford to hear it. SCID crisis. Liam's immune system is severely compromised. The fever indicates an infection his body can't fight on its own. He needs immediate hospitalization. 48 hours minimum. Depending on his response to treatment, We may be looking at gene therapy. The words landed like stones. Marcus knew what gene therapy meant. He'd researched it during the sleepless nights after Liam's diagnosis, scrolling through medical journals on his phone while his son slept fitfully across the room. Experimental. Expensive. The kind of treatment that insurance companies classified as investigational and refused to cover until you'd exhausted every other option, and maybe not even then. Cost? Marcus's voice came out rough. Dr. Okafor hesitated. The pause told Marcus everything he needed to know before the numbers even left the doctor's mouth. Observation and initial treatment, $18,000. Gene therapy, if it comes to that, starts at $240,000. The room tilted. Marcus felt Liam's weight in his arms, the boy's head resting against his chest, trust radiating from every point of contact. 18,000. 240,000. Numbers that might as well be 18 million for all the difference it made to a construction worker pulling $18.50 an hour. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, sharp and certain. I'll cover everything. Transfer him to the VIP wing, best specialists, whatever he needs. Marcus's head snapped toward her. The rage that had been simmering since the hallway boiled over. I've been doing this for 2 years without you. Marcus, you left when he was a baby. You don't get to buy your way back. Vanessa flinched, but her voice stayed steady. I was sick, Marcus. Postpartum depression. I couldn't function. You couldn't call? The words came out louder than he'd intended. Liam stirred in his arms, a small whimper escaping. Marcus lowered his voice, but the fury didn't diminish. You couldn't text? Send one message in 730 days? Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes again, but this time she didn't let them fall. My mother threatened custody, said I was unfit. She controlled my money for 8 months while I was in treatment. By the time I fought back, I was terrified you'd moved on, that Liam wouldn't remember me, that I'd lost the right to— You did lose the right. Marcus stood, Liam cradled against him. You made your choice. Live with it. Dr. Okafor cleared his throat, the sound diplomatic and utterly ineffective. Perhaps we should focus on Liam's immediate needs. Marcus wanted to walk out, wanted to carry Liam to the standard pediatric ward where families like his belonged, where the nurses spoke to him with pity instead of contempt, where the bills would bury him, but at least he'd maintain some shred of dignity. But Liam's breathing hitched. A cough racked his small body, wet and painful. Marcus felt the heat radiating through the dinosaur pajamas, fever climbing past the point where home remedies and hoping for the best would cut it. He looked down at his son. Liam's eyes were half closed, his skin flushed, his small hand gripping Marcus's shirt with fading strength. And in that moment, Marcus understood the cruelest truth of poverty. Sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes the people you were supposed to protect needed more than you could give, and pride was just another word for watching them suffer because you were too stubborn to accept help from the person who'd hurt you most. Fine. The word felt like surrender. But this doesn't change anything between us. Vanessa's expression shifted, relief mixed with something deeper, something that looked like gratitude but could have been a dozen other things Marcus didn't have the bandwidth to parse. She nodded once, already pulling out her phone, already making calls that would transform Liam's care from a bureaucratic nightmare into a well-oiled machine. Marcus sank back into the chair, Liam's weight settling against him. Through the small window in the consultation room door, he caught a glimpse of the hallway beyond. Nurses moved with purpose, patients shuffled past, and somewhere in the distance, barely visible through another set of glass walls, the conference room where Vanessa had been presenting to her board sat empty now, chairs pushed back, papers scattered, the meeting abandoned. He didn't know it yet, but Richard Brennan was already working. The photo had been sent. Calls were being made. Board members who'd spent years resenting Vanessa's meteoric rise were receiving messages that painted her as compromised, distracted, emotionally unstable. A CEO who'd abandoned her biracial son and was now using company resources to assuage her guilt. The machinery of destruction was in motion. And Marcus, holding his sick son in a consultation room that smelled like sterile failure, had no idea he'd just become a weapon in a war he didn't know he was fighting. 1 week dissolved into the kind of routine that felt both foreign and suffocating. Liam's room in the VIP pediatric wing occupied the corner of the 7th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Detroit's sprawl that Marcus had never seen from this height. The furniture was leather, not plastic. The walls displayed original artwork, abstract shapes in soothing blues and greens, instead of motivational posters. A private bathroom. A parent sleeper chair that actually reclined. Amenities Marcus's insurance would never touch, funded by a woman who'd signed the authorization forms without asking his permission. Marcus arrived each morning at 6, still wearing his construction clothes because the job site started at 7 and he couldn't afford to miss shifts. Concrete dust clung to his boots. The smell of rebar and sweat followed him through corridors where other parents wore business casual and spoke in the measured tones of people who'd never had to choose between rent and medicine. Liam's treatment proceeded with mechanical efficiency. 5 fluids first, then immunosuppressants to stabilize his crashing system. The fever broke on day 3. By day 5, Liam was sitting up in bed, playing with toy dinosaurs Vanessa had brought. Expensive ones, the kind with articulated joints and hand-painted details that cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a month. Vanessa visited every afternoon. She'd shed the power suits for something softer, cashmere sweaters, tailored slacks, still expensive, but less aggressive. She'd sit on the edge of Liam's bed, reading picture books in a voice that cracked on certain words, her fingers trembling when Liam grabbed her hand. Marcus watched from the corner chair, his body rigid with a tension that never fully released. He cataloged every interaction, every time Liam laughed at something Vanessa said, every moment his son looked at her with the kind of uncomplicated joy that should have been directed at the parent who'd stayed, who'd fought, who'd carried him through fever-soaked nights without a safety net. The nurse assigned to Liam's care was a woman named Jennifer, late 30s, blonde, the kind of efficient professionalism that came with working the VIP wing where patients had resources and expectations. She spoke to Vanessa with deference that bordered on warmth. When she addressed Marcus, her tone shifted, not overtly rude, just cooler, the verbal equivalent of a step backward. On the 6th morning, Marcus arrived to find Jennifer reviewing Liam's vitals with Vanessa, the two of them standing by the monitors, discussing T-cell counts and antibody responses in language that excluded him by design. Jennifer gestured at the chart. "Mrs. Hart, Liam's immune markers are improving. The protocol Dr. Okafor designed is exactly what he needed." Marcus's jaw tightened at the title. Mrs. Hart. As if Vanessa had earned the designation through something other than biological contribution and 2 years of absence. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through their conversation. "I'm his father. You can address me too." Jennifer glanced at him, her smile polite but empty. "Of course. Mr. Thompson, was it?" The correction landed with surgical precision. Not a question, a reminder that she had to check his name, that he wasn't the primary point of contact, that in this space his role was auxiliary at best. Vanessa's expression flickered with something that might have been embarrassment, but she didn't correct Jennifer, didn't assert that Marcus deserved equal footing. The silence stretched for 3 seconds before Jennifer returned her attention to the chart. Marcus felt the familiar burn in his chest, the same sensation from 1,000 small interactions over 3.5 years. Security guards following him through stores. Teachers assuming Liam's achievements came from external programs, rather than his own intelligence. doctors explaining basic medical concepts as if Marcus hadn't spent countless hours researching SCID, memorizing terminology, learning to advocate for a child whose survival depended on his ability to navigate systems designed to dismiss him. He crossed to Liam's bedside. His son looked up from the dinosaur battle staged across the blanket, his smile bright and unburdened by the tensions crackling between the adults in his orbit. "How much do you love me, Papa?" The question settled something in Marcus's chest. He knelt beside the bed, his rough hand smoothing back Liam's curls. "More than all the stars in the sky, little man." Liam's grin widened. He turned to Vanessa, his voice bubbling with excitement. "That's what Papa always says. He says it every day." Vanessa's expression crumpled for just a moment before she rebuilt it. "That's beautiful, baby." Marcus stood, his eyes meeting Vanessa's over their son's head. The unspoken accusation hung between them. "I was here. Every day. Every night. Where were you?" Jennifer finished her notes and departed with a professional nod that somehow included Vanessa but excluded Marcus. The door clicked shut. The room felt smaller suddenly, compressed by the weight of everything neither of them was saying. Vanessa broke first. "I know you're angry." Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Angry doesn't cover it." "Then what does?" He wanted to name it. Rage, betrayal, the soul-deep exhaustion of fighting alone while she built an empire. But Liam was listening, his dark eyes tracking the conversation even as his hands continued moving plastic dinosaurs across imaginary terrain. Marcus kept his voice level. "You're making decisions without asking. Moving him to VIP, bringing specialists. You're treating this like a hostile takeover instead of a family." Vanessa's composure wavered. "I'm trying to save our son. He's been my son for 2 years. You don't get to walk back in and pretend those years didn't happen." "I'm not pretending anything." Her voice rose slightly, then dropped when she caught herself. "I'm trying to make up for the worst mistake of my life." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper that wouldn't carry to Liam. "You think money fixes abandonment? You think flying in specialists erases the nights I held him through fever because I couldn't afford an ER visit? You're solving the problem you should have been here to prevent." The accusation hit its mark. Vanessa's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of Liam's bed. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I want you to stop controlling everything. I want you to ask before you decide. I want—" He stopped, the words catching. What he wanted was impossible. He wanted the last 2 years back. He wanted Sarah alive. He wanted a life where love was enough and money didn't determine whether his son lived or died. Liam's small voice interrupted. "Are you fighting?" Both parents turned. Liam had abandoned his dinosaurs, his expression caught between confusion and fear. The kind of fear that came from watching the 2 people who were supposed to protect you tear chunks out of each other instead. Vanessa knelt beside the bed, her voice gentle despite the tears threatening to spill. "No, baby, we're just talking. Adults sometimes talk loud when they're trying to figure things out." "But you're sad. And Papa's mad." Marcus forced his shoulders to drop, his fists to unclench. He moved to the other side of the bed, creating a triangle with Vanessa and Liam at the points. "I'm not mad at you, little man. I could never be mad at you." "But you're mad at Mommy." The word, Mommy, landed like a punch. Liam had claimed it without hesitation, attaching it to Vanessa as if the 2 years of absence were footnotes instead of chapters. And maybe for a 3.5-year-old, they were. Maybe children's memories worked that way, elastic and forgiving in ways adult hearts couldn't manage. Marcus swallowed the response that wanted to surface. Instead, he reached out, his hand covering Liam's much smaller one. Your mommy and I are working through some grown-up stuff, but we both love you. That's the important part." Liam seemed to consider this. Then he grabbed Vanessa's hand with his free one, creating a chain. "Then we can be a family again, like before." Vanessa's breath hitched. Marcus felt the connection through Liam's palm, his son's heartbeat, strong and steady despite the illness trying to kill him. The moment stretched, fragile and weighted with possibility that felt more like threat. Marcus pulled his hand back. The chain broke. Liam's face fell slightly, but he didn't protest. "I need to get to work." Marcus's voice came out rougher than intended. "I'll be back tonight." He left before Vanessa could respond, before Liam could ask why Papa was leaving when Mommy was staying, before the walls of the VIP suite could close in any tighter. The construction site sprawled across 3 acres of Detroit's industrial corridor, steel framework rising against gray sky, the smell of wet concrete and diesel fuel. Marcus's crew was already assembled when he arrived 20 minutes late, hard hats on, tool belts loaded, the kind of men who measured respect in sweat and competence rather than credentials. His foreman, Davis, 62, white, union, 30 years, glanced at his watch but didn't comment on the tardiness. Marcus had earned enough goodwill over the years that a few late arrivals didn't threaten his standing, but he could feel the looks from some of the younger guys, the questions they weren't asking about where he'd been, why his eyes were red, whether the rumors about his kid were true. Marcus grabbed his welding gear and headed for the 3rd-floor framework. The work was good for clearing his head, precise, methodical. No room for emotion when you were joining structural beams that would hold up thousands of pounds. Just measurements and heat, and the satisfaction of metal fusing under his hands. Lunch break came at noon. Marcus sat with his back against a concrete pillar, unwrapping the sandwich he'd made at 5 that morning. Turkey and cheese on store-brand bread, the edges already curling in the heat. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Liam's asking for you. Dr. Okafor wants to discuss next treatment phase. Can you come by after work?" Marcus stared at the screen. Next treatment phase. Translation? More decisions being made in rooms where he didn't belong. Conversations happening in medical terminology he'd have to Google later. Vanessa smoothing the path with resources and connections while he showed up in work boots and pretended his opinion mattered. He typed back, "I'll be there." Davis settled beside him, pulling out a thermos of coffee that smelled like it had been brewed sometime during the previous administration. "Your boy doing okay?" The question was casual, but Davis had earned the right to ask. He'd covered for Marcus during the worst of Liam's diagnosis, had quietly collected donations from the crew when medical bills started piling up, had never once made Marcus feel lesser for needing help. "He's stable. In the hospital for observation." "That's good." Davis took a long sip. "Heard through the grapevine his mother showed up." Marcus's hands tightened around his sandwich. The grapevine in construction moved faster than gossip at a church social. "Yeah. She helping out?" The question contained multitudes. Marcus knew what Davis was really asking. Is she making things better or worse? Are you okay? Do you need the crew to have your back? She's helping with the bills. The rest is complicated. Davis nodded slowly. He'd been married 40 years, raised 3 kids, buried a grandchild. Complicated was a language he understood. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself, too. Can't help your boy if you're running on empty. Marcus appreciated the sentiment, even if it felt impossible to implement. Sleep was a luxury. Self-care was a joke. Every decision he made revolved around Liam's survival. And now Vanessa had inserted herself into that equation, throwing off calculations that had barely been working in the first place. The afternoon shift blurred into repetition. Weld, measure, check, repeat. By the time Marcus clocked out at 6, His shoulders ached and his hands shook from the sustained grip on equipment. He drove back to St. Catharines through rush-hour traffic, watching the sun sink behind the skyline, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. The VIP wing felt different in evening light, quieter, fewer staff on duty. Marcus passed nurses who nodded politely, their expressions neutral in a way that felt practiced. He wondered how many of them had heard about the black construction worker and the white CEO, how many had formed opinions about who belonged and who didn't. Liam's room was dark, except for the glow of the television. Some cartoon about talking animals. Liam sat propped against pillows, still wearing his dinosaur pajamas, his attention fixed on the screen. Vanessa occupied the parent chair, her laptop balanced on her knees, fingers moving across the keyboard with the kind of speed that spoke of urgent emails and crises she was managing remotely. She looked up when Marcus entered. Something in her expression shifted. Relief mixed with tension, like she'd been waiting but dreading his arrival in equal measure. "Hey, little man." Marcus crossed to the bed, ruffling Liam's hair. His son's skin was cool to the touch, fever gone. One small victory in a war that kept demanding more. "Papa, I missed you!" Liam's arms wrapped around Marcus's neck with a strength that hadn't been there a week ago. The treatment was working. Whatever else was falling apart, at least that part was holding. Marcus settled onto the edge of the bed, his arm around Liam's shoulders. "Missed you too. What are we watching?" "Bears Who Solve Mysteries. Mommy says we can watch 2 episodes before bed." The casual mention of Vanessa's authority over bedtime routines scraped against Marcus's nerves. He forced his expression neutral. "That right?" Vanessa closed her laptop, setting it aside. "Dr. Okafor stopped by an hour ago. He wants to discuss transitioning to gene therapy." The current treatment is stabilizing Liam, but it's not a cure. Gene therapy could actually fix the immune deficiency. There it was. The next phase. The next decision. The next astronomical cost that would reshape their lives in ways Marcus was only beginning to understand. When? He can schedule it for next week if we approve. They have an opening in the clinical trial. Experimental protocol, but the success rate is 85%. Marcus heard the unspoken part. 15% failure rate. 15% chance that the treatment intended to save Liam could kill him instead. 15% of parents who went home without their children. Cost? Vanessa hesitated. The pause told him everything. $240,000. But I'm covering it through the Heart Medical Foundation emergency protocol. The number was so absurd it almost didn't register as real. Marcus made $18,000 a year before taxes. It would take him 13 years to earn that much, assuming he never ate, never paid rent, never got sick himself. "I need to think about it. Marcus, the trial spot won't stay open forever. Other families are waiting. I said I need to think about it." His voice came out sharper than intended. Liam flinched slightly, his attention torn from the television. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Okay. Think about it. But we don't have long." The conversation died. They sat in strained silence, watching animated bears solve a mystery about a missing picnic basket. Liam laughed at something on screen, the sound pure and unburdened. Marcus wondered how long that innocence would last. How long before Liam understood that his survival depended on calculations far beyond love or effort. At 8, a nurse arrived with Liam's evening medications. Marcus recognized her. Sharon Williams, 58, black, the kind of woman who'd probably seen every flavor of hospital drama and developed immunity to being impressed by power or wealth. She smiled at Liam with genuine warmth, checking his vitals with efficient hands. "Looking good, sweetheart. Those numbers are heading in the right direction." Liam beamed under the praise. Sharon handed him the pills one by one, waiting for him to swallow each before offering the next. When she finished, she tucked the blanket around him with a tenderness that made Marcus's chest ache. Sharon glanced at Marcus, then Vanessa. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, calculation, the sense of someone who understood the dynamics at play better than the people caught in them. "Mr. Thompson, can I speak with you in the hallway for a moment?" Marcus stood, catching Vanessa's questioning look. He followed Sharon out, the door clicking shut behind them. The hallway was empty, the overhead lights dimmed for evening, casting everything in shadows that felt appropriate for whatever Sharon was about to say. She pulled a manila folder from beneath her arm. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but you seem like a man who deserves to know what he's dealing with." Marcus took the folder, his heart rate picking up. "What is this?" "SCID treatment approvals for the last 5 years. I've been working this floor for 20 years. I notice patterns." Marcus opened the folder. Spreadsheet data. Patient names redacted, but demographics visible. Race, insurance status, treatment outcomes, approval timelines. The numbers told a story that made his stomach turn. White families with private insurance, 94% gene therapy approved within 48 hours. Black families with Medicaid, 61% approved after an average wait of 12 days. Latino families, similar numbers, similar delays. Marcus's hands shook as he flipped through page after page of documentation. Sharon had highlighted cases, families who'd waited so long their children died before treatment arrived. Insurance denials couched in medical language that boiled down to one truth: some lives were worth saving faster than others. "This is systematic." Sharon's voice was quiet but firm. "And your son? He's about to become another statistic unless someone with power decides he's worth prioritizing." Marcus looked up from the folder. "Vanessa authorized his treatment immediately." "Because she can. Because she's CEO of Heart Medical Group. But what about the families who don't have a CEO fighting for them? What happens to their children?" The question landed like an indictment. Marcus had been so focused on his own struggle, pride versus pragmatism, love versus resources, that he hadn't seen the larger pattern. Liam was getting VIP treatment, not because he deserved it more than other sick kids, but because his mother had power and was willing to use it, which meant dozens, maybe hundreds of other children were waiting, suffering, dying because their parents didn't have connections or wealth or a CEO willing to make calls. "Why are you showing me this?" Sharon met his eyes with an intensity that felt like a challenge. "Because I've watched you with your son. You're a good father. You fight for him. But there's a bigger fight here, and it needs people who understand what it costs when the system decides some children matter less than others." Marcus closed the folder, his mind racing. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "I don't know. But I know doing nothing means more families like yours get crushed, while people like Vanessa Hart make exceptions for the ones they happen to care about." Sharon paused. "She's not a bad person, but she's part of a system that's been failing families like yours for years. Maybe she can help change it, or maybe she's too invested in maintaining it." The nurse walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the dimmed hallway with a folder full of evidence that transformed his personal struggle into something larger and more damning than he'd imagined. He stood there for a long moment, weighing the folder in his hands. Inside Liam's room, he could hear his son's laughter through the door. The sound of Vanessa reading another book, her voice gentle and invested in ways that would have felt like victory a week ago. But now, Marcus heard it differently. The sound of privilege. The sound of power choosing one child to save while leaving others to statistics and wait times and systemic indifference. He returned to the room, tucking the folder under his arm. Vanessa looked up from the book, her expression questioning. Marcus said nothing, just settled back onto the edge of Liam's bed, his son curling against him, warm and alive and worth fighting for. Worth fighting for. All of them. Every child Sharon had documented. Every family ground down by a system that valued efficiency over equity. Marcus didn't know how yet, but something in him shifted, hardened, crystallized into a determination that went beyond Liam's individual survival. If he was going to accept Vanessa's help, and he had to, pride be damned, then she was going to help more than just the one child she'd abandoned. She was going to confront the system she'd benefited from, the patterns she'd probably never noticed because they'd never applied to her. Or he'd make sure everyone knew exactly how the CEO of Heart Medical Group distributed mercy. 3 days later, the decision made itself. Liam's immune markers started declining again despite the current treatment. Dr. Okafor's recommendation shifted from suggestion to urgency. Gene therapy wasn't optional anymore. It was survival. Marcus signed the consent forms in Vanessa's presence, his hand steady even as his insides churned with fear and resentment in equal measure. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to pretend this was a normal medical procedure and not a gamble with his son's life. Vanessa handled the logistics with the efficiency of someone who'd built an empire on solving problems. She arranged for Marcus to take leave from the construction site, paid leave she'd somehow negotiated with his foreman, despite the fact that his position didn't include benefits. She coordinated with specialists from Boston, the ones who'd pioneered the experimental protocol. She made sure Liam's room was stocked with new toys, new books, every distraction money could buy to keep a 3.5-year-old from understanding he was about to undergo a procedure that would either cure him or kill him. Marcus watched it all with growing discomfort, not because Vanessa wasn't helping, but because her help highlighted every gap in his own capacity, every limitation imposed by poverty that he'd been navigating for years, suddenly rendered invisible by her wealth. On Thursday evening, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find a stranger in Liam's room. A man in his early 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of presence that announced authority before a word was spoken. Richard Brennan. Marcus recognized him from the conference room incident, the CFO who'd been watching when Liam first pointed at Vanessa. Richard stood near the window, speaking with Vanessa in low tones that stopped the moment Marcus entered. Vanessa's expression shifted, guilt mixed with defiance, like she'd been caught doing something she knew would upset him, but wasn't sorry enough to stop. Marcus, this is Richard Brennan, our chief financial officer. He was just leaving. Richard's smile was polished and empty. His eyes swept over Marcus with an assessment that felt clinical, taking measure, filing away details for later use. Mr. Thompson, I've heard a lot about you. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Marcus had been around enough corporate types to recognize the tone, the one that said, I know things about you, and none of them work in your favor. That right? Marcus kept his voice neutral. Vanessa speaks highly of your dedication to your son. Admirable, really, the way you've managed on your own all this time. The praise felt like an attack. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Richard's smile widened fractionally, as if he'd gotten the reaction he wanted, despite Marcus's silence. Richard turned back to Vanessa. We'll continue our conversation tomorrow. The board has concerns that need addressing. He left, his departure leaving a vacuum that filled quickly with tension. Liam, mercifully, was absorbed in his cartoon and missed the entire exchange. Marcus crossed to Vanessa, keeping his voice low. What was that about? Vanessa's hands twisted together, a rare break in her composure. Board politics. Nothing you need to worry about. If it involves Liam, I need to know. She met his eyes, and for a moment he saw past the CEO mask to something raw beneath. Fear, maybe, or shame. Richard is using our situation to undermine my position. He's telling the board I'm compromised, distracted, using company resources for personal reasons. Marcus processed this. He's using Liam against you. He's using both of you. The photos from the hallway, the fact that I authorized emergency protocol for my biological son. He's framing it as nepotism, favoritism, evidence that I can't be trusted to lead objectively. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Vanessa was facing consequences for helping Liam, consequences that came from a system she'd helped build, populated by people she'd worked alongside for years. The same system that had created the disparities Sharon had documented, the patterns that saved some children faster than others based on variables that had nothing to do with medical need. What are you going to do? Vanessa's voice steadied, some of her corporate steel returning. Fight. The board meets Monday. I'll present my case, defend my decisions. Richard wants my job. He's wanted it since I blocked his promotion last year. This is his leverage. Marcus thought about the folder Sharon had given him, the evidence of systematic delay, the families who'd lost children because no one with power had cared enough to fight the system. Vanessa was fighting now, but only because her own child was at stake. What would she do if Liam recovered and the pressure eased? Would she forget the other families, the ones without CEOs advocating for them? Maybe you should step down. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. Vanessa recoiled as if he'd struck her. What? Marcus kept his voice level. If being CEO means Liam becomes a weapon Richard uses against you, maybe it's not worth it. I built this company. Your mother built it. You inherited it. And now it's costing you more than you're willing to pay. Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger and hurt. You don't know what you're asking. I know what it's like to choose between pride and my son's survival. You're the one who forced me to make that choice. Maybe it's time you made it too. The accusation hung between them. Liam shifted on the bed, drawing their attention. His eyes were open, watching them with the kind of awareness that children developed when adults thought they weren't paying attention. Are you fighting again? Both parents froze. Marcus felt the weight of his son's question, the plea beneath it for stability, for the adults in his life to figure out how to exist in the same space without tearing each other apart. Vanessa knelt beside the bed, her voice gentle despite the tears threatening. No, baby. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. But everything's okay. Liam didn't look convinced. His small hand reached for Marcus. Papa, are you leaving? The question cut deeper than intended. Marcus crossed to the bed, taking Liam's hand. I'm right here, little man. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Marcus's throat tightened. He'd made promises before, to Sarah on her deathbed, to himself during the endless nights after her death, promises about being enough, about protecting Liam, about never letting his son feel abandoned. He'd kept those promises through sheer will and sacrifice, but now with Vanessa here and the gene therapy looming and systems conspiring in ways he couldn't control, those promises felt more fragile than ever. I promise. Liam's smile broke through the anxiety. He tugged both parents closer, creating another chain with his small hands connecting theirs. Then we'll be okay. Because you both love me more than all the stars in the sky. The phrase, Marcus's phrase, the one he'd whispered through countless bedtimes, coming from Liam's mouth in Vanessa's presence, felt like surrender and acceptance tangled together. Marcus looked at Vanessa over their son's head. Her eyes were wet, her composure fractured, all the corporate armor stripped away to reveal something that looked uncomfortably like the woman he'd loved 4 years ago, before postpartum depression and Eleanor Hart's manipulation had torn their family apart. But looking like that woman and being her were different things. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way. Trust, once broken, didn't rebuild just because someone cried or fought or threw money at problems they should have prevented. The folder Sharon had given him burned in his mind, the evidence of systemic failure, the families waiting while their children declined, the pattern that would continue long after Liam's gene therapy succeeded or failed. If Vanessa wanted redemption, she'd have to earn it, not just with Liam, with all of them. Every family the system had failed while she climbed corporate ladders and signed denial letters without looking at the names attached. Marcus pulled his hand free from the chain. The gesture was small, but Vanessa noticed. Her expression flickered, understanding, maybe, that forgiveness wasn't a destination, but a process, and they were still miles from the finish line. Outside Liam's room, in hallways Marcus couldn't see, Richard Brennan was making calls, planting seeds, framing narratives, building the case that would force Vanessa to choose between the empire she'd inherited and the family she'd abandoned. And in 5 days, surgeons would open Liam's body and try to rewrite his genetics, gambling that science could fix what nature had broken. 85% success rate. 15% chance that Marcus would bury another person he loved, this time carrying the knowledge that he'd signed the consent forms himself, that he'd chosen this risk because pride mattered less than survival. The weight of it pressed down like concrete. Marcus kissed Liam's forehead, breathing in the smell of hospital soap and fever sweat, and the faint trace of the dinosaur-shaped cookies Vanessa had brought that afternoon. "Get some sleep, little man. Big day tomorrow." Liam yawned, his eyes already drooping. "Will you be here when I wake up?" Marcus nodded. Every morning. It was the only promise he knew he could keep. The Hart Medical Group boardroom filled with the kind of silence that preceded either breakthrough or devastation. Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. 14 board members arranged around the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to openly hostile. Eleanor Hart occupied the chair at the head. Not her official position anymore, but power didn't always respect organizational charts. 73 years old, silver hair in a severe bun, the kind of woman who'd built a regional hospital empire from a single clinic and never forgot what it cost. Vanessa stood at the presentation screen, her white suit immaculate despite the sleepless night that had carved shadows beneath her eyes. Behind her, data glowed: quarterly earnings, patient satisfaction scores, expansion projections, numbers that should have told a story of success, but felt increasingly irrelevant in the face of what was really being judged. Richard Brennan sat 4 seats from Eleanor, his tablet angled just enough that Vanessa could see the photos displayed. The hallway confrontation, Vanessa on her knees, Marcus holding Liam. Images cropped and contextualized to tell a story about a CEO who'd lost control, who'd let personal drama compromise professional judgment. Eleanor's voice cut through the tension with surgical precision. "Vanessa, we're concerned. Not about your competence, your record speaks for itself, but about your priorities. This situation with the construction worker and the child—" "My son," Vanessa's interruption was quiet but firm. "His name is Liam. He's not the child. He's my biological son who I left 2 years ago because I was sick, and I'm fighting to earn back the right to be his mother." The confession landed like a grenade. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor's expression hardened into something that looked like disappointment wrapped in fury. "You abandoned a child, and now you're using company resources The Heart Medical Foundation emergency protocol to assuage your guilt? Vanessa's hands trembled. She gripped the edge of the table to steady them. The foundation exists to provide emergency care for patients who can't afford treatment. Liam qualifies. His father makes $18,000 a year. The gene therapy costs $240,000. Without intervention, Liam dies. That's not nepotism. That's exactly what the foundation was designed for. Richard leaned forward, his voice carrying the false concern of a man enjoying someone else's drowning. But you authorized his treatment within hours of his admission. Other families wait weeks for foundation approval. Families without a CEO personally invested in the outcome. The accusation hung in the air. Vanessa felt the board's attention shift, skepticism crystallizing into judgment. She'd known this moment was coming, had rehearsed responses, but nothing prepared you for watching people you'd worked alongside for years decide you were compromised, damaged, unfit to lead. She pulled up a new slide, Sharon Williams's data, reorganized and annotated. 5 years of treatment approvals, broken down by demographics, insurance status, wait times. The pattern screamed from the screen in colors no one could ignore. You want to talk about who gets priority treatment? Let's talk about the systematic delays that kill children while we debate insurance coverage. White families with private insurance? 94% approved within 48 hours. Black families on Medicaid? 61% after 12 days. Latino families? Similar numbers. 73 children died in the last 5 years waiting for approvals that should have been automatic. The room erupted. Voices overlapping. Board members demanding sources, questioning methodology, insisting the data was cherry-picked or misinterpreted. But Eleanor's face had gone pale, and Vanessa knew she'd struck bone. Where did you get this? Vanessa met her mother's eyes without flinching. A nurse who's been documenting our failures for 20 years. She's kept files because she knew eventually someone would need evidence of what we've been doing. We implemented efficiency protocols. You implemented discrimination. Vanessa's voice rose, carrying over the protests. Coded language that prioritizes high-value patients and delays treatment for families who can't afford to fight back. And I've been complicit. I signed denial letters. I approved wait times. I let this continue because it was profitable, and I was too focused on climbing to CEO to notice I was stepping on children's graves. The silence that followed was different, heavier. Vanessa could see the calculations happening behind board members' eyes. Legal liability, public relations disasters, federal investigations. The kind of exposure that didn't just cost jobs, it destroyed legacies. Eleanor stood slowly, her voice tight with controlled rage. You're using inflammatory language to deflect from your personal scandal. I'm using accurate language to describe a systemic problem you created and I perpetuated. And yes, I'm fixing it because my son almost became another statistic. But that doesn't make the problem less real. It makes my complicity more shameful. Richard seized the opening. So you admit you're compromised, emotionally invested in a way that clouds your judgment. I admit I was blind until it affected me personally, and now I can't unsee it. Vanessa advanced the slide to show specific cases, names redacted, but stories intact. A 7-year-old with leukemia who died waiting for bone marrow transplant approval. A 5-year-old with cystic fibrosis whose treatment was delayed until her lungs failed. Children who should have lived, but didn't because someone decided efficiency mattered more than equity. Gerald Thompson, the Grosse Pointe board member who'd called Liam her alleged son, cleared his throat. His voice came out measured, careful, the tone of a man trying to find solid ground in shifting terrain. What are you proposing? Vanessa had prepared for this question, had spent 3 sleepless nights building a plan that would either save her position or end her career. She pulled up the final slide. Immediate independent audit of all treatment denials for the past 10 years. Community Advisory Board with authority to review approval processes. mandatory wait time tracking by demographics, and a $15 million fund, $8 million from company reserves, $7 million from my personal assets, to cover retroactive treatment for the 73 families who lost children and the 127 cases currently in the system. The numbers were staggering. $8 million from company reserves would decimate the quarterly earnings. $7 million from Vanessa's personal wealth would liquidate most of her portfolio. Board members were already calculating how shareholders would react, whether the PR benefit would offset the financial hit. Eleanor's voice cut through the murmurs. You're proposing to bankrupt yourself and damage company profitability to fix a problem that's existed for decades. Why? Because one nurse gave you a folder and you suddenly developed a conscience? Vanessa turned to face her mother directly. The woman who'd built an empire, who threatened custody to force Vanessa away from Marcus and Liam, who'd taught her daughter that success meant hard choices and acceptable casualties. Because I left my son when he was 6 months old, convinced myself it was for his own good, and spent 2 years building power I thought would make me worthy of him. And when I finally saw him again, burning with fever in his father's arms, I realized power without compassion is just another word for cruelty. I won't let 73 dead children be the foundation of my legacy. The words emerged with a finality that felt like resignation and revolution tangled together. Vanessa could see the board fracturing, some members nodding slowly, recognizing the moral imperative even if they hated the financial cost. Others, Richard's faction, the ones who'd never trusted a woman in the CEO chair, already preparing their opposition. Eleanor stood, her chair scraping against polished floor. The board will deliberate. You're dismissed. Vanessa gathered her materials, her hands steady despite the adrenaline crash threatening. As she reached the door, Eleanor's voice followed her. You're choosing him over this company, over everything we built. Vanessa paused, not turning around. I'm choosing not to repeat your mistakes. The difference is, I'm not too proud to admit when I've been wrong. She left before Eleanor could respond, before the mask could crack, before anyone could see how terrified she was that she'd just destroyed her career for a redemption she might never earn. The surgical suite occupied the 3rd floor of St. Catherine's Medical Center, accessible only through sterile corridors where the air tasted metallic and time moved differently. Marcus sat in the pre-op waiting area, his construction clothes exchanged for the visitor scrubs the hospital required. Liam had been taken back 30 minutes ago, small and trusting in the arms of surgical nurses who'd promised he'd just take a nap and wake up feeling better. The lie was necessary. You couldn't explain to a 3.5-year-old that surgeons were about to open his bone marrow and introduce modified viruses designed to rewrite his genetic code, that the next 6 hours would determine whether he lived as a healthy child or died from complications no amount of money could prevent. Dr. Okafor had explained the procedure that morning with the careful patience of someone who delivered this speech too many times. Gene therapy for SCID involved harvesting Liam's bone marrow stem cells, modifying them in a lab to correct the genetic defect, then reintroducing them through infusion. Success meant Liam's immune system would rebuild itself properly. Failure meant rejection, infection, organ failure, death. 85% success rate. The number had felt reassuring in the abstract, but sitting in a waiting room with other families whose children were undergoing similar gambles, Marcus understood the 15% differently. 15 families out of every 100 walked out of hospitals carrying only memories and death certificates. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes after Marcus, her board meeting apparently concluded. She'd changed from the power suit to jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She settled into the chair beside Marcus without asking permission, her presence both comfort and complication. How long? Marcus checked the wall clock. They took him back 43 minutes ago. Dr. Okafor said the procedure takes 4 to 6 hours. Vanessa nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. They sat in silence, surrounded by other families in various states of waiting. An older couple holding hands, their faces carved with exhaustion. A young mother pacing near the window, phone pressed to her ear. A father slumped in the corner, eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been prayer. After 20 minutes, Vanessa spoke. "I might have just lost my job." Marcus glanced at her. "The board meeting." "I presented evidence of systematic discrimination, treatment delays that killed 73 children over 5 years. I proposed a $15 million fund to fix it, $8 million from company reserves, $7 million from my personal assets. Richard Brennan called me emotionally compromised. My mother said I was choosing you and Liam over the company." Marcus processed this. $7 million. The number was so far beyond his comprehension, it barely registered as real. "What did you say?" "That I'm choosing not to repeat her mistakes." The phrase hung between them. Marcus thought about the folder Sharon had given him, the families who'd lost children because no one with power had cared enough to fight. Vanessa was fighting now, but was it genuine transformation or guilt-driven performance? Would she maintain the commitment when the personal stakes decreased, when Liam recovered and the crisis passed? The families who lost kids, will they actually get help, or is this just PR? Vanessa's expression tightened. "Every case will be reviewed. Families will receive compensation for medical debt and funeral costs. The fund will operate independently with community oversight. I'm not doing this for PR. I'm doing it because—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "Because I can't undo leaving Liam. But maybe I can prevent other families from losing their children to a system I helped maintain." Marcus wanted to believe her, wanted to accept the redemption arc she was scripting, but belief required trust, and trust took time he wasn't sure they had. A television mounted in the corner displayed local news. The volume was low, but Marcus caught fragments of the closed captioning scrolling across the screen. Something about Heart Medical Group, a statement from the board, Vanessa's name. She noticed his attention shifting, followed his gaze to the screen, her face drained of color. The headline read, "Heart Medical CEO admits systematic discrimination in treatment approvals." Below it, a photo of Vanessa from this morning's meeting, her expression caught mid-sentence, looking defensive and guilty in equal measure. The news anchor's mouth moved, words Marcus couldn't hear but could imagine. Scandal, controversy, questions about leadership. Richard Brennan's quotes about compromised judgment and personal agenda. Vanessa's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously, a cascade of notifications that didn't stop. She pulled it out, her hands shaking. Text messages from board members, emails from hospital administrators, news outlets requesting interviews. Social media mentions climbing into thousands as the story spread. It's out. Someone leaked the board meeting. Marcus felt a strange detachment. Vanessa's professional destruction was happening in real time, broadcast across screens while their son fought for survival 3 floors below. The juxtaposition felt almost obscene. Public scandal and private crisis colliding in ways that made both feel less real. Vanessa stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Her reflection ghosted against the glass, superimposed over Detroit's skyline. "I need to release a statement. Control the narrative before Richard spins this into— Liam is in surgery." The words stopped her. Vanessa turned, her expression fractured. "I know." "Then sit down. The board meeting is over. The story is out. There's nothing you can do about it from this waiting room. Be here. For once, just be here." The accusation was quiet, but landed hard. Vanessa's composure finally shattered. She sank back into the chair, burying her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs that she'd probably been holding back since the moment she'd knelt in that hallway 2 weeks ago and realized she'd lost 2 years with her son. Marcus didn't comfort her, didn't reach out or offer reassurance. He'd spent 2 years alone, and she'd spent them building a career that was now imploding. The symmetry felt almost karmic. But after a minute, when her crying didn't stop, something in him softened. Not forgiveness, not trust, just the basic human recognition of shared suffering. He reached over, his hand covering hers. The contact was brief, awkward, weighted with history neither of them knew how to process. Vanessa looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry. For leaving, for everything I missed, for thinking I could buy back what I threw away." Marcus withdrew his hand. "Sorry doesn't fix it, but maybe showing up does. Every day. Not just when it's convenient or when you feel guilty. Every single day." "I will. I promise." "Don't make promises you haven't proven you can keep." The response was harsh, but honest. Vanessa absorbed it without protest. They settled back into silence, watching the clock advance with agonizing slowness. Other families were called, children out of surgery, parents escorted to recovery rooms. The waiting area gradually emptied until only Marcus and Vanessa remained, time stretching into an elastic infinity where minutes felt like hours and hope warred with terror in silence. At hour 4, Dr. Okafor emerged through the surgical suite doors. His scrubs were wrinkled, his face showing the particular exhaustion that came from intense concentration. Marcus's heart seized. He'd learned to read doctors' expressions over 3.5 years of medical crises. Okafor's face was carefully neutral, neither celebration nor devastation. Both parents stood simultaneously. Vanessa's hand found Marcus's arm, gripping tight enough to bruise. They advanced together, a temporary unit forged from shared fear. The procedure went well. No complications during the gene modification or infusion. Liam's stable and moving to recovery. Marcus's knees nearly buckled with relief. Vanessa made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, but Okafor held up a hand, tempering their response. "The next 72 hours are critical. His body will either accept the modified cells or reject them. We'll monitor for signs of graft versus host disease, infection, organ stress. If he makes it through the first 3 days without complications, his chances improve significantly. But we're not out of the woods yet." The caveat was necessary. Marcus understood the medicine well enough now to know that successful surgery was just the first hurdle. Liam's body had to do the rest. Rebuild, adapt, accept the genetic rewrite without rebellion. "Can we see him?" Okafor nodded. "He's in pediatric ICU, still sedated, probably won't wake for another few hours. But you can sit with him." They followed the doctor through corridors that felt different now, charged with possibility instead of just dread. The pediatric ICU was a warren of glass-walled rooms where children fought invisible battles while machines beeped their vital statistics into the sterile air. Liam looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, his body dwarfed by equipment. IVs in both arms, oxygen cannula, monitors tracking heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. His skin was pale, his chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. But he was alive, breathing, fighting. Marcus sank into the chair beside the bed, his rough hand covering Liam's much smaller one. The skin was cool, dry, unmarked except for the IV sites and surgical tape. Marcus counted heartbeats on the monitor, finding rhythm in the numbers that grounded him. Vanessa stood at the foot of the bed, her hand resting on Liam's ankle through the blanket. Her phone continued buzzing in her pocket, ignored now, irrelevant compared to the child between them. Hours dissolved. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in hushed tones that respected the sanctity of waiting. Night fell outside the ICU windows, Detroit's lights painting patterns across the glass. At midnight, Liam stirred. Small movements at first, fingers twitching, head turning. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Hey, little man. You're okay. Surgery's over. You did great." Liam's gaze found Marcus, then drifted to Vanessa. His mouth moved, words emerging slurred by anesthesia. "Papa? Mommy? You're both here." The observation was simple, but it carried weight. Both parents. Together. The family configuration Liam had been asking for since the moment he recognized Vanessa through that conference room glass. "We're both here. We're not going anywhere." Liam's smile was drowsy but genuine. His eyes closed again, sleep reclaiming him. But his hands gripped both parents. Marcus's on the left, Vanessa's on the right. An unconscious claim that bound them together through the fragile connection of a child who'd survived the first test. Marcus looked at Vanessa over their son's sleeping form. Her expression mirrored what he felt. Relief tangled with fear. Hope shadowed by the knowledge that they had 72 more hours before safety became anything more than provisional. "Thank you." Vanessa's voice was barely audible. "For letting me be here. For not shutting me out." Marcus didn't respond immediately. "Thank you" felt insufficient for the complexity of what they were navigating. But maybe insufficient was all they had right now. Maybe redemption was built from inadequate gestures repeated until they accumulated into something resembling wholeness. "He needs you. I can hate what you did and still recognize he needs his mother. Do you? Hate me?" The question deserved honesty. Marcus considered it, searching past the anger and resentment for something closer to truth. "I hate what you did. I hate that you left when he needed you. I hate that your money is the reason he's alive right now, because it proves everything I couldn't give him on my own. But you? I don't know. Hate takes energy I need for other things." Vanessa absorbed this, her throat working. "That's fair." They settled into vigil, taking turns sleeping in the parent chair while the other kept watch. The ICU had rules about visitor hours, but Dr. Okafor had apparently made exceptions, power and privilege cutting through bureaucracy in ways that would have angered Marcus a month ago, but now just felt necessary. Day 2 brought challenges. Liam's fever spiked to 102. His platelet count dropped, requiring transfusion. The medical team hovered, adjusting protocols, running tests, searching for signs of rejection that would mean the gene therapy had failed. Marcus watched the doctors work with a helplessness that felt familiar. This was the part he understood. The waiting, the hoping, the powerlessness against biology that wouldn't bend to will or love. Vanessa paced, making calls to specialists, demanding second opinions, trying to control what couldn't be controlled. At hour 56, Dr. Okafor returned with results. His expression was cautiously optimistic. "The modified cells are engrafting. Early signs suggest his body is accepting them. Fever's coming down. If the trend continues, we're looking at success." If. The word carried galaxies of uncertainty. But it was better than nothing. Better than the alternative. Day 3 arrived with Liam more alert, asking for food, complaining about the IV in his arm. Normal kid complaints that felt like miracles. His energy returned in increments. By evening, he was sitting up, playing with the dinosaurs Vanessa had brought, narrating elaborate battles between species that existed millions of years apart. Marcus felt the tension in his shoulders begin to release. 3 days. They'd made it through the critical window. Complications could still arise, but the worst immediate danger had passed. Vanessa received a call at 7 p.m. She stepped into the hallway to take it, her expression guarded. When she returned 20 minutes later, her face was unreadable. The board voted. I'm out as CEO, effective immediately. Eleanor secured enough votes to remove me. Richard Brennan takes over as interim while they search for permanent replacement. Marcus processed this. Vanessa had lost her position. The empire she'd built, or inherited depending on how you counted, was gone. I'm sorry. She shook her head. I'm not. I proposed the audit and the fund. They can't undo that without massive PR backlash. The reforms will happen whether I'm CEO or not. And honestly, her gaze shifted to Liam, who was making a T-Rex fight a Stegosaurus with sound effects. I'd rather be here. I missed too much already. The sentiment would have felt performative a week ago, but watching Vanessa settle into the chair beside Liam's bed, her professional armor completely stripped away, Marcus saw something that looked like genuine peace. She'd lost power and found purpose. Whether that purpose would sustain when the crisis ended remained to be seen. Over the next 2 weeks, Liam's recovery exceeded projections. His immune system rebuilt itself with stunning efficiency. The gene therapy had worked. Blood tests showed healthy T-cell counts. His body was manufacturing the proteins it had been missing since birth. By week 3, Dr. Okafor was discussing discharge plans. Marcus returned to the construction site, his paid leave exhausted. Davis welcomed him back without fanfare, just a nod and a work assignment that said more than words. The crew had followed Liam's progress through Marcus's updates. They celebrated the recovery quietly, the way working men celebrated victories, with handshakes and knowing looks and extra care in the work they did together. Vanessa moved into a smaller apartment closer to Marcus's building. Not with him, they weren't there yet, might never be, but close enough that shared custody logistics didn't require elaborate coordination. She'd liquidated most of her portfolio to fund the settlement. $7 million distributed among 73 families who'd lost children and 127 currently fighting for approvals. The media covered it extensively. Some outlets praised her accountability. Others questioned whether throwing money at systemic problems absolved individual guilt. Marcus didn't know the answer, but he watched as families started receiving checks, as treatment denials got overturned, as the independent audit forced Heart Medical Group to confront patterns they'd ignored for decades. Change was happening. Slow, painful, insufficient, but real. 4 months after the surgery, Michigan's state legislature introduced the Treatment Equity Act, mandatory demographic tracking for all hospital approvals, public reporting of wait times, penalties for systematic delays. The bill was nicknamed Liam's Law by advocates, though Marcus had never asked for that distinction. The community health center opened 6 months post-surgery, funded by the settlement, staffed by doctors who'd left Heart Medical Group after Vanessa's firing. Sharon Williams served on the advisory board. The center provided free care for families who'd been systematically denied treatment. 127 families became 300, then 500. Marcus attended the ribbon cutting with Liam, now 4 years old and healthy enough to run around the parking lot chasing imaginary dinosaurs. Vanessa stood beside him, her hand occasionally brushing his arm in gestures that were becoming familiar. Not romantic, not yet, but something warmer than co-parents and less than lovers. A category they were inventing as they went. Reporters asked Marcus for quotes. He kept them brief. No child should die because their parents can't afford to fight the system. Liam got a second chance. This center exists so other families get theirs. The reporters wanted more. Wanted him to denounce Vanessa or praise her to fit the narrative of redemption or revenge they were constructing. Marcus refused the binary. Reality was messier than sound bites. That evening, Marcus and Vanessa took Liam to the park near Marcus's apartment. The same park where Marcus had spent countless afternoons watching other families play while Liam stayed home behind sterile barriers. Now, Liam ran freely, his immune system robust enough to handle playground germs and scraped knees. They sat on a bench, watching their son climb a structure designed to look like a castle. Vanessa's phone stayed in her purse, ignored for once. She'd taken a consulting position with healthcare advocacy groups, using her expertise to fight the systems she'd once upheld. The work paid a fraction of her CEO salary, but seemed to suit her better. "I've been thinking about what you said, about showing up every day." Marcus glanced at her. "Yeah?" "I want to ask if we can try. Not jumping into anything, but actually trying to rebuild what I destroyed. For Liam. For us." The question was careful, tentative, stripped of the certainty she used to carry like armor. Marcus considered it, watching Liam reach the top of the castle and wave, triumph written across his face. "I don't trust you yet. You know that, right? Trust takes time." "I know. And I'm not interested in being your redemption project. If we do this, it's because you actually want to be here, not because you feel guilty." "I want to be here. I want to know my son. I want—" She paused, choosing words with visible care. "I want to know if the person who walked away can become someone worthy of the family she abandoned." Marcus absorbed this. It wasn't a promise, wasn't a guarantee, just an honest acknowledgement of uncertainty and intention. Maybe that was enough to start. "Okay, we can try. Slow. No moving in together, no big declarations. Just showing up. Every day." Vanessa's smile was small but genuine. "I can do slow." Liam ran back to the bench, breathless and glowing. "Papa! Mommy! Watch this!" He ran back to the castle, climbing with the fearless efficiency of a healthy 4-year-old. Marcus felt Vanessa's hand find his, their fingers interlacing tentatively. The gesture was small, but it carried weight, an acknowledgement that they were building something fragile and necessary, constructed from broken pieces that might never fit perfectly, but could maybe hold together if they were careful. 2 years later, Marcus Thompson stood at the Michigan State Capitol as Governor Patricia Mitchell signed the Treatment Equity Act into law. Beside him, Liam, now 6 years old and fully recovered, watched with the solemn curiosity of a child witnessing history he didn't yet understand, but would someday inherit. The reforms Vanessa had championed spread faster than anyone predicted. 8 states passed similar legislation within 18 months. The Hart Medical Community Health Center, funded by her settlement and operated independently, had served 573 families by its 2nd anniversary. Sharon Williams directed the advisory board. Dr. Okafor led the clinical team. Every treatment approval was tracked, measured, made public. Marcus returned to construction work but spent evenings consulting with advocacy groups, teaching other fathers how to navigate systems designed to dismiss them. His testimony before state legislatures became the blueprint for reform movements nationwide. Vanessa never returned to corporate healthcare. She took a faculty position at Wayne State University's School of Medicine, teaching medical ethics and healthcare equity to students who would inherit a system she'd help break and repair. She and Marcus moved slowly. Dates that felt awkward at first, family dinners that gradually became routine, a tentative engagement announced on Liam's 7th birthday. Richard Brennan served 14 months in federal prison for embezzlement before being released to a halfway house. Eleanor Hart retired from all board positions, her legacy permanently marked by the discrimination scandal. Neither appeared at Liam's recovery celebration. On the evening of the signing ceremony, Marcus, Vanessa, and Liam returned to their neighborhood park. The same castle structure. The same bench where they'd sat 2 years earlier, deciding to try. Liam ran ahead, his laughter carrying across the playground. Healthy, unburdened, alive. Marcus felt Vanessa's hand slip into his, her fingers interlacing with practiced ease. No words needed, just the quiet recognition that they'd survived the worst and built something worth keeping from the wreckage. In the distance, the Detroit skyline caught the last rays of sunset, painting the city in shades of amber and possibility. Some promises took years to keep, but this one To show up, to fight, to be present, had become the foundation of everything that mattered. They were finally home.